All right, let's dive into this. The Fates. Who are they? What do they do? And why are they so fascinating? I mean, we've got excerpts here from Wikipedia on fates and Proto-Indo-European mythology, a page about the Moirai from GreekMythology.com, and an article from Greek Mythology, that website, all about the fates. So, like, are we really bound by destiny's threads or what? And how much power do they actually have, even over, like, the gods?
Well, it's interesting actually. This whole concept of like fate or destiny is not just a Greek thing. It pops up in a lot of European polytheism, often as like three goddesses who, well, they literally control the threads of destiny.
Yeah, it's always the weavers, right?
Yeah.
What is it about that? The spinning, the measuring, the cutting? Why those metaphors?
I think it's more than just like poetic imagery, right? It gives us a glimpse into how the ancient Greeks saw fate. It was intricate and it was predetermined. It's like this perfectly woven tapestry with every thread exactly where it needs to be. That's how they saw life, and the fates were the ones weaving it all.
So, like, no random chance then. It's all
Good.
planned out.
Precisely. And you see that in their names. The three Moirai, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. They translate directly to their jobs. Spinner, allotter, and inevitable.
Wow. So their names are like job descriptions, for real.
Exactly. And this connection between name and purpose, it pops up in other cultures too. You've got the Roman Parse, the Albanian Ora, Infati, the Slavic Rezanetsi, all riffs on this same idea, these powerful women who decide destiny.
So it's a pretty universal concept then, this idea of a predetermined path. Like everyone's kind of wrestled with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even the Norse have their Norns, three sisters weaving destiny at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. I mean, it really speaks to something like fundamental, those big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Do we actually have any control over our lives?
But there are some differences, right? Like the Baltic mythology has these divas Valditojo, seven sisters weaving garments. Seven, that's a whole sewing circle deciding fate. What's the deal with that?
Yeah. It's a good example of how, a basic concept can be um, changed and reinterpreted. The number seven is a big deal in a lot of cultures, often representing like wholeness or spiritual perfection. So maybe the seven sisters represent a more, complex, multifaceted view of fate.
Okay, so let's focus on the Greek Moirai. I always thought it was cool that their name means like allotted portion or share. It's like they're literally dividing up fate.
And it goes even deeper than that. They believed the Moirai showed up within 3 days of a baby being born to decide their fate. Imagine that you're a newborn and these three powerful figures just like roll up to decide your destiny. Talk about pressure.
Oh man, I know. Can you imagine three figures at your crib like, all right, kid, here's what you're getting. Kind of terrifying, right? But then again, I mean, if they're deciding your eternal fate, maybe a little bedside manner wouldn't hurt.
I like that. It really does highlight how they can be both like scary and also potentially good. They weren't just about the start of life either. They were also about how it ends and what comes after.
So their influence went beyond just like being alive. They had a say in the afterlife too.
Exactly. Their choices had consequences. Where your soul ended up in the underworld, Elysium, Tartarus, the fields of Asphodel, the Moirai, held the key.
So it wasn't just about how long you live, but also how your afterlife goes. That's some high stakes. But what about the gods themselves? Were they subject to the same fate spinning as us mortals?
Ah, well, now that's where things get really interesting. The relationship between the gods and the fates was, shall we say, complicated and sometimes even contradictory.
So last time we were talking about how the fates had influence, like everywhere, right? Birth, the afterlife, the whole nine yards. But I want to get into the myths themselves. Like, how did this all actually play out in the stories?
Well, we need to meet each of the Moirai, right? Get to know them a bit, see what their individual roles were in all this fate weaving.
Okay, so let's start with Clotho, the spinner. I always picture her as like this cosmic seamstress with a giant, like the biggest ball of yarn you've ever seen.
Yeah, that's a pretty good image. You got the essence of it. She creates the thread of life, right, at the moment of birth,
Mm.
gets the loom going, so to speak. But it's more than just, being born. It's about potential, I think. Like imagine Clotho at the moment you were born, spinning that thread and all the possibilities that were like contained in it.
So she's not like deciding my whole future, just giving me a starting point.
Exactly. She's not writing the script, right? But she's creating uh the material, the thread that your story is going to be woven from. Kind of makes you think, huh, you're given this potential, but what you do with it is, well, at least to some degree, up to you.
Okay, so the thread is spun, right? The potential's there. But who decides how long it'll be? That's Lachesis, right? The measurer.
Right. She's the one who determines how long the thread is, how
Yeah.
long you live. She's got the cosmic measuring tape, making sure it all fits with the grand plan. But there's more to it than just deciding when you die.
It can't just be like, okay, you get 75 years, see ya.
No, no, it's not that simple. Lachesis is also concerned with the quality of that lifespan, like how much joy, how much sorrow, how much triumph and tribulation you experience. Think of it like this: she's not just measuring the thread; she's also determining its texture, its thickness, how it feels overall.
I like that. It's not just about how long you live, but like how you live it. All the experiences that are, woven into that thread.
Exactly. And all that ties into where that thread will end
Oh.
up, right? The afterlife.
Mhm.
Lachesis is the one who makes sure each life, with all its ups and downs, leads to the appropriate destination in the underworld.
So it's like no matter how long you live or what you do, she's making sure it all adds up to something.
I think that's the idea. It's a reminder that our lives are part of something bigger, right? A pattern that goes beyond just our own individual experiences.
So we've got the thread spun by Clotho, measured and given its character by Lachesis, which means, well, here comes the end, right? Atropos, the cutter.
Yeah, no beating around the bush with that name, huh? Atropos is, well, she's the inevitable. She's the one with the shears, ready to snip that thread when the time is right.
Of the three of them, she's always been the one I find the most unsettling. Death, the finality of it all. It's scary. No wonder she's often depicted as like the most serious, the most unyielding.
Yeah, well, her job definitely requires, a certain firmness. No hesitation there. When fate says it's time, Atropos acts. And once that thread is cut, that's it.
But even though she represents death, she's also like a necessary part of the cycle, right? I mean, without death, there can't be any rebirth, any renewal.
You're absolutely right. The Moirai, even in their, more intense aspects, they embody that balance, the interconnectedness of it all. Birth, life, death, afterlife, it all flows together, and it's orchestrated by these powerful goddesses.
Okay, so we've met the Moirai. We know, like, who does what. But how did it all actually play out in the myths? We talked about them having power over the gods, right? Did they ever, like, clash with Zeus or any of the others?
There are definitely some stories where the will of the gods and the decrees of the fates seem to come into conflict. One of the most famous examples is the story of King Admetus and his wife Alcestis.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. Didn't Apollo, like, trip the fates into saving Admetus's life?
Exactly. Apollo was incredibly loyal to Admetus, and he really wanted to save him from dying young. So he got the fates drunk, and he managed to trick them into letting someone else take Admetus's place in the underworld.
Wait, so you can trick the fates? I thought they were, like, all-powerful, all-knowing.
Well, this myth seems to suggest that they did have their weaknesses, that they could be, swayed by cleverness, at least in some circumstances. But, there are different versions of this myth. In some versions, the fates they know exactly what Apollo is doing, and they let it happen as part of, some larger plan.
So maybe they weren't tricked? Maybe it was all part of the plan all along, and they were, like, in on it the whole time.
It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, right, can anyone really outsmart the fates, even the gods?
So even when it seems like someone's defying fate, maybe they're actually just playing a role in a bigger story. But what about the times when the fates, like, directly intervened? Were they always working behind the scenes, or did they ever, get their hands dirty?
Oh, there are definitely myths when they step out of the shadows and take a more active role. Remember the war between the gods and the giants, that big cosmic showdown?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was pretty intense, right?
Intense doesn't even begin to describe it. But what's interesting is the fates didn't just, sit back and watch. They joined the fight, wielding these bronze maces, taking down some of the toughest giants themselves.
No way. So they were like warriors too, fighting alongside the gods to keep everything in order.
Exactly. They weren't just concerned with, individual fates. They were also concerned with the fate of civilizations, the fate of the cosmic order itself.
Okay, so they could handle a giant or two, but what about like a monster, like like Typhon. We're talking like multiple heads, venomous snakes, wings that block out the sun. He was like the ultimate bad guy.
Oh, Typhon was he was a force to be reckoned with, no question. But even he was no match for the cunning of the fates.
Did they fight him like head on?
Not quite.
Yeah.
They tricked him. They got him to eat some ephemeral fruit, the kind that disappears as soon as you touch it.
Wait, so they used trickery? I thought they were all about like, cold, hard fate.
Well, their methods weren't always, direct. They were working within this complex web of destiny and free will. Sometimes, they had to nudge things along in unexpected ways.
So they were like cosmic chess masters, always like thinking several moves ahead.
Exactly. And one of the best examples of their strategic thinking is the prophecy of Thetis's child.
Oh, right, the one that said her son would be greater than his father, which totally freaked out Zeus, right? I mean, who wants to be dethroned by their kid?
Exactly. Zeus was understandably worried about this prophecy, especially since Thetis was, this powerful sea nymph. And the fates, they orchestrated this prophecy, creating a situation where Zeus had to, he had to be careful to hold on to his power.
So even Zeus, the king of the gods, had to play by the fates' rules.
It certainly seems that way. It just shows that even the gods were, bound by destiny in the end, even if they had some wiggle room.
Okay, but sometimes it seems like fate just like goes completely haywire, right? Like with Phaethon and his joyride in the sun chariot. Talk about a cosmic accident.
Yeah, that was definitely a case of fate taking a pretty tragic turn. But remember, it was the fates who allowed Phaethon to borrow the chariot in the first place.
That always seemed I don't know, a little harsh to me. Like why set him up to fail like that?
There are different ways to interpret that myth. Some people see it as a warning about hubris, about reaching too far. Others think the fates allowed it to happen because it serves some larger purpose, like maybe a necessary reset or a reminder of how powerful fate really is.
So even when bad things happen, maybe it's because the fates are like playing the long game, orchestrating things to maintain balance or teach a lesson. But it wasn't always about, these huge cosmic events, right? They were also connected to nature, the changing seasons through Persephone.
That's right. The myth of Persephone and Demeter, how her annual trip to the underworld brings winter, is a perfect example of how the fates were part of the natural world.
So they weren't just about individual destinies then. They were involved in keeping the whole rhythm of the cosmos going.
Exactly. The ebb and flow of life and death, but on this grand scale.
And they also showed compassion sometimes, right? Remember Chiron, the centaur, who was accidentally shot with that poison arrow.
Yeah.
He couldn't die because he was immortal, but he was in agony constantly. Awful. What did the fates do?
They took pity on him, granted him release from his immortal suffering, let him finally find peace.
So they weren't just these cold, emotionless beings. They could be moved to actually help.
That's right. It's a reminder that even in a world seemingly governed by fate, there's still room for mercy, for acknowledging individual pain.
So we've seen the fates, battling giants, tricking monsters, setting up prophecies, even showing mercy. They were busy, but were they always predictable, or were there times when even they were surprised by how things turned out?
That's a great question,
Yeah.
And it's one that we'll explore as we get into some even more intriguing myths in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so where were we? Oh, right, the fates. We've talked about their roles, how they influence both mortals and gods, and even times when they directly got involved in those major mythological events. But I'm still kind of stuck on this idea, were their actions always set in stone, or were there ever times when even they seemed, I don't know, surprised by how things played out?
That's a really good question, actually, and it gets to the core of one of the biggest mysteries in all of Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Fate versus free will.
Yeah, exactly. Because if everything is already decided, if the fates have already woven the whole tapestry of existence, then what's the point of, even making choices? Do we really have any agency, or are we all just puppets?
The Greeks themselves wrestled with this. On the one hand, they believed in this powerful force, Moirai, destiny, fate. but they also valued individual choice, the idea that that humans could, to some extent, shape their own lives.
So how did they square those two ideas? They seem kind of contradictory.
Stories, myths were their way of exploring these big philosophical questions in a way that was, entertaining and thought-provoking.
Okay, so let's get into some of those stories.
Ah.
Were there any myths where the fates' plans like went off the rails, where things didn't go quite the way they'd intended?
There's this interesting myth about this king, Ares. He was known for being, well, arrogant and disrespectful to the gods. He even chopped down a sacred grove that was dedicated to Demeter, the goddess of agriculture.
Ooh, not a good move. Demeter was she was not one to mess with.
You got that right. So to punish Erysichthon for his hubris, Demeter cursed him with this insatiable hunger.
Insatiable hunger. So like no matter how much he ate, he was always hungry.
Exactly. The fates in this case seem to have woven this thread of like relentless desire into his destiny. But what's interesting is the myth doesn't actually say that they wanted him to suffer like this. Maybe they just set the stage knowing his actions would have consequences, but leaving the details of his punishment to Demeter.
So they like laid the groundwork, the cause and effect, but allowed for some wiggle room.
Right. It suggests that even within the boundaries of fate, there's room for choice and consequence. Erysichthon could have chosen to respect Demeter's grove, but he didn't, and that set off a chain of events that led to his downfall.
It's kind of like those choose your own adventure books, right? You make a
Yeah.
decision and it determines what happens next. So maybe the fates give you the options, but it's ultimately up to you which path to take.
That's a great analogy, and it emphasizes that fate doesn't necessarily mean that every little thing in our lives is preordained. It might set the general direction, the overall arc of our journey, but within that framework, we still have the freedom to make choices that affect our experiences and shape who we become.
Okay, but what about those situations where people seem to like actually defy fate, like Oedipus, right? He did everything he could to avoid that prophecy, the
Yeah.
one where he'd kill his father and marry his mother, but it happened anyway. Does that mean like free will is just an illusion?
Oedipus's story is, well, it's one of the great tragedies, isn't it? And it really does raise these profound questions about how much agency we actually have, especially in the face of fate.
Right, because no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried to escape his destiny, it still got him in the end. It's almost like he was fated to try to defy fate, only to like prove how powerful it was in the process.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, and maybe it means that maybe free will and fate aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin, intertwined in ways that we can't really fully grasp.
So maybe it's not about whether we can escape fate, but how we choose to live with it.
I like that, and it brings us back to your original question.
Yeah.
Were there times when even the fates themselves seemed surprised by how things turned out?
Right, because if they know everything, if they've meticulously planned every detail of everything, then there shouldn't be any surprises, right?
Well, there's this fascinating story about the birth of Heracles, one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology.
Heracles, yeah, son of Zeus and Alcmene, that mortal woman, famous for his strength, his 12 labors, all that. But what does his birth have to do with the fates?
Well, Hera, Zeus's wife, was she was famously jealous of his affairs, and she really, really wanted to prevent Heracles from being born.
So she tried to like mess with fate's plan.
Exactly. She used her divine powers to delay Heracles' birth, hoping to give another child, Eurystheus, a chance to be born first and inherit the throne of Mycenae.
So it was like a race against time, a battle between Hera and the fates.
That's a good way to put it. And for a while, it really seemed like Hera might actually pull it off. But the fates, well, they're not easily outmaneuvered. They tricked Hera into swearing this oath that the next child born of the Perseid lineage would be the ruler.
And of course, that child ended up being Heracles.
You got it. Hera, without realizing it, helped to fulfill the very prophecy she was trying to stop. And here's the kicker: the myth says that even the fates were surprised by what Hera did.
Wait, they didn't see that coming. Seriously.
Seems like it. The myth actually describes them, chuckling to themselves, amused by how Hera was unknowingly helping them, which suggests that even the fates, with all their knowledge of the past, present, future, could still be surprised by the choices that gods and mortals made.
Wow. That's pretty wild. It means that even within like, the grand scheme of fate, there's still room for unexpected things to happen. Free will, even if it's limited, can still really shake things up.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive into the fates. Their stories aren't just about this predetermined path that we're all forced to follow. They're about this fascinating back and forth between fate and free will, the dance between destiny and choice.
So we might not be able to control everything, but we do have the power to make choices, to act with courage and compassion, and to shape our own destinies, at least within the boundaries that fate has set for us.
Exactly, and that's a powerful message, right? One that resonates across cultures and time. The fates, in their own way, remind us that life is a journey full of challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
And while we may not always know where the path will lead, we can choose to walk it with intention, purpose, and a sense of wonder.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the fates, I'm left with this feeling of like awe and inspiration. These ancient stories remind us that even when we're up against forces bigger than ourselves, we still have the power to choose to act with intention and to create meaning in our lives.
And maybe that's the most important legacy of the fates. Wouldn't you say? They make us think about the big mysteries of life, to wrestle with this idea of fate and free will, and to embrace all the beauty and complexity of being human.
So to all of you listening out there, as you go out into the world, remember the lessons of the fates. Embrace the mystery. Make your choices, intentionally, and weave your own amazing tapestry of life.